Good morning. I'm Micah Modell, and I'm here presenting with Yasmine Kalkstein. We also, as part of our team, we also had Jody Fay, who is on maternity leave and therefore will not be joining us for the presentation today. And Emily Mazurko is a student who was also instrumental in this, and she unfortunately was not able to attend. But the other participants in this or contributors were Kristen Della Sala and her team, and so we need to send out a big thanks to them for all that they provided for this. I'd like to begin by pointing out that today's presentation is not particularly interactive. Sorry for that. There is actually a presentation we're going to be delivering on the 7th, a workshop, which is going to be the more interactive portion where we'll be asking you to really engage with this. But we're looking at the campus perspectives from the past 2 semesters, or the COVID-mesters, and while this image on screen, the green eggs and ham imagery, may not make sense now, we're going to revisit it at the end, and I promise you we will revisit it, and I hope it will make sense by that point. So with that said, I'm going to hand this off to Yasmine.
Hi, everybody. So the data that we're drawing on today for this presentation started, first of all, in March. I was really fortunate to collaborate with a really great team on this. Jody, Micah, Kristen, Emily. Later, we brought in Rob Wakeman. And it was particularly enjoyable. It all started when I was on my way skiing to Vermont when I got the news that we're going remote. And I texted Kristen Della Sala and said, wow, this seems like a really great opportunity for research. And Kristen said, you know, it's funny, I was just talking to Micah about that. And within an hour, Micah and Jody and I had started I literally was developing the survey while my husband was driving in the car. And we got the survey out within 24 hours of getting the news. So we were going remote, and captured the data within those first 48 hours, which means that this was really before we started remote teaching. In June of 2020, we again sent out a survey. At this point, the goal was, after you've been through the semester, what do you think? Perceptions, attitudes. In September of 2020, after everyone had been through the training and the experience, we again sent out a survey. And the last collection of data that we're using for today was actually institutional collection in October of 2020, where they collected data on both students and faculty, looking again at perceptions and attitudes. The first question that I was really interested in, so going back to March 2020, I'll mention March 2020 was when I didn't really think this COVID thing was a big deal. And I just need to actually make official message to Evan Merkhofer. You were right. I was totally wrong. But in March 2020, one of my first questions was, well, we're all being forced to go online. Are we going to learn something from this? Are we going to take something and transfer it to future teaching? And that was really my initial interest. So that was the first question we asked. And the answer to that was, there was a spread. First of all, some of us said yes, but 17% said probably not or definitely not. And we're going to return to that in a moment. When we look at concerns our faculty had, so in that initial survey, we had a couple open-ended questions. And from that, we categorized the answers. There were some concerns that were uniquely COVID. How am I going to do this with children at home? And honestly, I'm still asking that question. And making the change quickly. How am I going to do this in 48 hours? So converting to online pedagogy was certainly an issue. And we got a lot of comments from people from the field of science, people who were doing field work and education, for example. I still remember a comment from a yoga teacher who said, how am I doing yoga online? And at the time I thought, well, of course you aren't, that's stupid. And now I find out that like my entire parents' generation is doing online yoga, so go figure. Academic integrity, of course, was a concern. How are we going to put these tests online? And one of the last themes we saw come up was, of course, technology concerns, right? Zoom was not really a thing that many of us knew about. In fact, a lot of us didn't even use e-class back then.
So assuming nobody gets sick, we wanted to ask, assuming nobody gets sick, which obviously wasn't a safe assumption, but assuming nobody got sick, from this point forward, compared to what you had done in your course before moving online, how did you expect your experience and your students' experiences would compare, right? So this graph represents how we expected our own experience to what we expected of our own experience. And generally speaking, we didn't expect a whole lot. And then when we went ahead and brought in what our expectations were for our students, it was pretty similar. We expected that they would have a slightly better experience, but generally it was all skewing to towards the negative. We did have a spread though, and so it is important to notice that some people expected that people would have a better experience, even a much better experience, and then of course a much worse experience as well. So it's not like it was consolidated. It was certainly all over the place, but skewing certainly towards negative. We were also interested in expectations regarding student and faculty experience. And here what we're looking at is, or what we found is, first of all, how did we think it was going to go for our students was related to how capable we felt, our own perceived competence with respect to that related or that correlated with our own expected experience. If we felt better about it, then we expected it. If we felt more competent, then we expected it was going to be a more positive experience. And that seems to pretty much make sense. Then we also found a one-question measure of anxiety, but we realized when we saw the resulting data that we really couldn't do much with it. We were kind of all over the place, but we did note that in our analysis, it looked like anxiety was correlated with how bad we thought the experience would be for both us and for our students. Again, this kind of makes sense because, in other words, if we were feeling negative, that feeling was pretty pervasive. The more anxious we felt, the less competent we felt. Right? Anxiety and competence were negatively correlated. So that was us. But we wanted to dig a little bit deeper and figure out, were we sort of unique in this? Were we were generally not in favor of taking things online, but was that because of something unique about Mount St. Mary? COVID aside, were we unusually averse to online education? We went ahead and decided to do a quick scan of the literature. And in that scan, we found pretty quickly, we found a bunch of stuff, and this is just a sampling of it. We found that in 2019, people were indicating that while digital learning leaders agree that online courses can achieve parity with in-person experiences, faculty members tended to often disagree. And again, that was in 2019. And that was before COVID. And they were already writing about faculty resistance to online education. Then we went further and found that in 2013, we had, again, faculty don't accept, and that was obviously 6 years earlier, faculty still don't accept the legitimacy of online education. So this is going back a ways.
Sorry, had to find that unmute button. So I was interested, even just larger than just online learning. Are faculty more resistant to innovation? I had reason to maybe believe that. And so naturally, I put into Google Scholar, resistance to innovation in higher education, and bam, I was super excited to find this article until I discovered that the publication date was 1968. I usually tell my students that's a bit old. But here's the interesting thing. Back in 1968, they are talking about resistance to innovation in higher ed. In this case, it was educational TV clips in the classroom. So the point, this is not a new issue. So understanding the resistance. Let's dig a little bit deeper. Oh, Chuck, that symbol there's for you, by the way. Okay, next slide. So when we look at faculty resistance to online learning, if we want to break it apart, where's it coming from? Here's a list that we found in the literature. And I can tell you from a personal perspective, I check all these boxes, right? Increased workload. Yes. Designing an online course and moreover, constantly the feedback and the grading, right? It's a lot of work to do it well. Unwillingness to complete online training. I love faculty development, but at the same time, it's hard to squeeze these things in, additional training. Skepticism about the quality of online learning compared to face-to-face. I've had countless hours of arguments with Kristen de la Sala and Micah Modell about how it just can't replace face-to-face learning. So I'm still on the side of being a bit skeptical. And reluctance to change, right? Reluctance to change is especially an issue for faculty that have been teaching longer. We often have played around a lot with our courses. We've made our mistakes. We've learned from them, right? And that might be why research has shown that tenured professors are more resistant compared to untenured professors. The last point that I found in the literature I thought was kind of interesting was talking about where innovation, the resistance to innovation in higher ed may stem from, how one of the reasons may stem from us as faculty members. We have sort of a dual identity. On the one hand, we're affiliated with our organization, we're a teacher, but on the other hand, we also have this professional identity and we're a researcher. And we're always trying to balance, right, these two identities. And when our organization is pulling at us to do new things, that may come at the cost of our professional identity. So let's say the Mountain comes out and says, we're gonna do oral exams from now on instead of written exams, right? That may come at the cost of things I want to do professionally or the time that I might be spending on my research. Micah, you're
on mute. So the upshot of this is that this is real, right? This is documented in the literature. It's not just us, right? This is a real thing. Resistance to change and it's not just with respect to online learning, right? There are legitimate reasons why we as faculty, not just as Mount faculty, but as faculty tend to resist change. It's difficult to do. And so we're actually going to be talking more about that. There's certainly a lot more to dig in here, but we're going to talk about that a lot more on January 7th. So shameless plug for our workshop on the 7th. It's going to be called Change. It's not a 4-letter word. So let's go ahead. I hope to see all of you there.
So after COVID-mester, so now it's end of May, June, what are we thinking? Well, I, for one, am thinking, wow, I'm really glad that we don't have to worry about toilet paper shortages anymore. Optimists like me are convinced that like one 90-degree day and we're going to wipe this thing out, right? I look back and realize how naive I was. But in terms of how we felt about our experience, did we use new tools? Blue means yes, obviously, right? You can see we all use new tools. But the second question, again, going back to original survey, we asked, are there going to be tools and techniques that you're going to learn here that you're going to take back to the classroom? And sorry, I don't know if the graph moved off because you can't really see what the bars are, but I'll just tell you on the left, it starts definitely, and on the right, it goes to probably not. What we found out is, first of all, no one said definitely not this time. In March, 17% said definitely not or probably not. This time, only 3% are saying probably not. So we realize a lot, over 50% are saying very probably or definitely I'm using these new tools back in a face-to-face classroom. So what new tools did they use? Well, you guys know what you used, right? All sorts of things. The biggest was probably Zoom. We all discovered Zoom. I was thinking back in March how I wanted to invest in this thing called Zoom. And the other day, as I was putting this together with Micah, I went and checked the stock and Zoom has doubled. And I realized I probably should have actually followed through on my thought. So a larger scale survey that was given out in 2019 to over 1,000 faculty, published in Inside Higher Ed, showed or really confirmed what we found, which shows that experiencing teaching online develops teaching offline as well. So 77% of faculty are saying that as a result of teaching online, I have developed skills and tools and practices that I will bring back to my classroom when we get back to the classroom. So we were also curious, did faculty comfort with remote learning grow? Not surprisingly, right? If you try something, you're gonna eventually just get more comfortable with it, right? So most of us are saying, yeah, we're more comfortable with it. The second question that I was interested in is perception. So what do we think now, right? So think for a moment about what you thought about online learning a year ago and what you think now. Some of you may, and I really didn't know how this data would come out. I thought maybe some of us would go, wow, this is really like the worst idea ever. Maybe some of us would go, hey, it actually can work. So I was really fascinated with the results. If you look at the yellow on the pie graph, that is, I have not changed my mind. Okay, so a little bit less than half of us are kind of where we were before. But what was amazing to me was that 44% are saying, I feel more positively about online learning. And 8% said, I feel more negative. Now, this result that in general, experiencing something makes you feel more positively about it in the realm of online learning was also validated by the Inside Higher Ed survey that came out in 2019. What you can see circled on the left side, if you add up those numbers, it comes out to 44%. 44% of faculty that have taught online say that online teaching can achieve the same student learning outcomes as in class. Compare that to faculty who have never taught online, that number adds up to 21%. So again, actually doing it seems to make people feel more positively about it.
So remember what we'd said going into the original COVID-mester. We had the concerns listed here, right? Converting to online pedagogy and academic integrity and technology concerns. We had other concerns as well that came out in that survey. And this was an open-ended element in the survey. And so we pulled some of those pieces out. These were some more of what we found in that survey. And then we replicated that survey where we followed up a little bit. And we noticed some changes. After all the summer training, we wanted to get one more measure of where we were at. And remember, sort of where we were at originally, this is what the graph looked like now, right? You'll notice that technology concerns and pedagogy and academic integrity are still listed, right? But they're certainly not the major concerns any longer. Now, the larger concerns are certainly technology concerns are still up there, but it's actually smaller than concerns about interaction and group work and collaboration, and then about student motivation and student capability and student anxiety. And we read this to indicate that, or clearly this indicates that we've moved beyond just sort of, can I find the right button, right? Can I manage to share my screen in time? Can I get my head around these technology tools? And we're moving much, further beyond that into appropriate pedagogy. We've achieved a level of comfort. Now, granted, we're still working on that, and there's still new tools to learn and still improvements to achieve, but we're clearly moving more towards pedagogy and a student-centered approach rather than the sort of nuts and bolts of actually getting the content out there. And then this data came from October 2020. 83 faculty basically told us that they still might not love online learning, but a majority of respondents thought that it was at least fairly effective, right? Which seems to be an improvement. But then when we bring in, here is the student perspective, right? And here we had 408 students responding, and they definitely skewed a lot more negative, right? And we see a bit of a disconnect here, right? They feel that they got much less out of it. There's really a lot to think about with this. And even if we had all the answers, we certainly wouldn't have the time to talk through all of this stuff here. But clearly, as we'd expect, there's room for some improvement on at least some levels. And then we could bring in some other interesting data. We also had an idea, or we also had some data on the adult student population, or the adult learners, and there were only 30 of these, but they offered an even more positive perspective, even than our faculty offered. Certainly, there was some negativity, and it tended to skew a little bit more towards the negative side of things. But if you look over on the left-hand side of this chart, they're actually pretty positive about this, which makes sense because often adult learners juggle other responsibilities and seek out the flexibility offered by online learning.
Okay, so take-home messages. Coming back to Green Eggs and Ham. Might have been a while since you read it, right? But the yellow character over there on the right, he's resistant. He doesn't want to try it. He finally tries it and says, "Say, I like green eggs and ham. I like them, Sam, I am." Okay, a bit positive, right, for some of us. But at the very least, what we found is that trying it at least is going to lead to us all learning new things. I think, as Micah pointed out, our concerns shifted, right? Initially, we were very much in survival mode, trying to figure out technology, right? We're now asking, I think, bigger and probably more interesting questions, like how can we engage students? How can we motivate them? How can we take care of their emotional needs as well in the classroom? I think what our data reveals, especially that October survey, is that we've got to start focusing our attention on the students and how we can make the experience better for them from their perspective. I think one thing to consider is that students right now, like a lot of us, are probably feeling just in general pretty negative. And when we feel kind of crappy about things, a lot of times that just pervades everything. Nonetheless, I think it's still important to ask the question, where is the dissatisfaction? I know that the digital learning instructional design right now is really focused on looking at the student experience. The project that Rob Wakeman is on with us also is looking more at the student experience as well. And so hopefully we're going to be able to turn our attention more to thinking about designing with their experience in mind more.
So we've seen a good deal of faculty development activity. There's a lot of visible peer-to-peer sharing on Slack, which many of you have taken part in, and I'm sure that many of you have also taken part in some less public activities, right? Certainly on Slack, I've seen evidence of a lot of interdepartmental or interdivisional discussions, and I'm sure that it's not only happening on Slack. So, and then there was also the, all of us have at this point worked through the online training from basically from Kristen's team. And we're gonna wanna lean into all of these opportunities. We've all learned a lot, and I don't think that any of us are really about to drop all of the tools that we found over the past 2 semesters that have worked well for us. Certainly, we might not take everything with us, but I don't think that things are going to go back to exactly the way things were before. We've learned more, and we can continue to learn and adapt. And that brings us to our final shameless plug for the January 7th workshop following the keynote. This is intended to be interactive, and we're hoping that you guys will all bring your thinking caps and really get into working towards how we build a culture of continuing innovation, build and maintain a culture of continuing innovation here. So thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much, Micah and Yasmine.